Good morning, friends. Welcome those that are here today at Simply Grace United Methodist Church, as well as those who are joining us online. We are just so grateful that we have been able to come together this morning to worship our amazing God. And so this morning, we are going to begin with a welcome to worship that Lon is going to start us with, and just give me one moment so I can turn on his audio.
God is here.
He bids us welcome.
God invites.
We respond through Jesus Christ.
God draws us near. God is present.
In this we can trust.
God lights our way. Peace be with you sounds like it's 4 signs, but it isn't. It's only 3. In sign language, we often drop the little words A and the B because they're really not necessary for good communication. So the 3 signs we'll need this morning are peace with you. Peace is gathering all the things around your heart, taking them down and smoothing them out. That's the sign for peace. And a 2-part sign. Peace. The B, we don't use B, so we'll just drop that. With, here's one thing, here's another thing, they're together, and push out, and that's with. Peace, with, and you. You can be plural or singular, depending on if I'm going to point to a certain person. In this case, it's to the rest of the congregation, so we kind of sweep the room. Peace with you.
Today's scripture comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, verses 29 through 39. As soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon and Andrew. And Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with fever, and they immediately told Jesus about her. And so he went to her, took her hand, and helped her up. And the fever left her, and she began to wait on them. That evening, after the sunset, the people brought to Jesus all the sick and demon-possessed, and the whole town gathered at the door. And Jesus healed many who had various diseases and drove out many demons. But he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up and left the house and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him, and when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." And Jesus replied, "Let us go somewhere else, to nearby villages, so we can preach there also. That is why I came." And so he traveled throughout Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and driving out the demons. This is the word of the Lord. Have you ever been around someone whose presence was just exhilarating? You know, maybe it was someone famous. I remember seeing pictures on, documentaries about girls screaming at the sight of the Beatles, or maybe Elvis. My mom said that happened with Frank Sinatra. Who knows? Or how about when you are at the first game of a season and you're at the field and there's just all kinds of high hopes and there's that new player and you have such hopes and possibilities and the excitement and the exhilaration is really there. You know, I think that's exactly what was happening in those first recorded hours of Jesus's ministry. It was a whirlwind of activity and excitement. And I think Mark wanted us to catch the fact that when Jesus enters human lives, that things change fast and for the better to anyone who is open. And there is no limit to Jesus's power or authority, for it is for all people, in all places, at all times. And that those both natural and supernatural knew who Jesus was. Something new and unexpected was happening here, and Jesus is on the move. Will you pray with me, please? Dear God, I just ask you to give me words and give me direction so I can help lead your people to be on the move with you. Amen. So it was a very dramatic morning at the synagogue. And Jesus, after that, went to the home of Simon and Andrew. And because of the restrictions of the Sabbath observant, they were supposed to have a nice, quiet Sunday afternoon, or Saturday, actually it was, afternoon. But when they get there, Simon's mother-in-law is ill. And Jesus is just moved to cure her. And as a result of that, and everything else that had happened already at the synagogue, the whole city ends up showing up at Simon's door. And Jesus, that whole day long, heals people into the wee hours of the morning when he leaves to find a quiet place to pray. Just a few verses before this, Simon and Andrew had just left their father's fishing boat along with their friends James and John, and they had decided that they were going to give up fishing to follow this itinerant rabbi, Jesus. At this point, they're still in their hometown of Capernaum, and they go to the synagogue, and immediately Jesus begins preaching and healing, and he even does an exorcism. And you can imagine what a fuss that would create, right? And then, Mark loves the word immediately. I think it's because he wants people to know that things are moving quick when it comes to Jesus. And so again, immediately, when they get to Simon Peter's house, Jesus heals by just touching the hand, Simon's mother-in-law. One, the exorcisms and the preaching is a very dramatic public event. And the other, walking in and healing Simon's mother-in-law with a touch of a hand, is a very private, quiet act. But soon, Jesus is healing people all over Capernaum. Jesus' ministry is very widespread, and we can see quickly that everyone wants to get to be a part of it. But it's not until later that day that the apostles get the idea of how far and wide this ministry is going to go, when Jesus shares with them that his plan is to leave behind their homes and their families and set out and go all over Galilee to preach and teach and heal. If we read the Gospels, we can see that that is the pattern of Jesus' life: to enter towns and cities, to heal, to teach, to visit, to eat, to head off to pray, and then being on the move again. And then you do it all over again. You heal, you teach, you visit, you pray, you move along, repeat. Jesus and his followers are on the move. Jesus doesn't want to settle down in one place or just to one fixed audience, but instead he is reaching out to new places and new people, and each group has a unique opportunity because it is a unique setting. In the stories that we will share in our Life with Jesus series over the next couple of weeks, we'll see that the life of Jesus is very public to start out with. Jesus does ministry in public settings such as synagogues and on mountainsides. And wherever there are crowds, Jesus seems to be in the center of them. Life with Jesus is also, however, intimate. There are plenty of times when Jesus just calls together a few disciples, and they're headed out for some time away from the crowds. And in these intimate settings, Jesus expands and deepens his teachings. Life with Jesus is also private. We see Jesus heading out to deserted places to have time alone to pray and to center himself. Jesus comes away from these times of refreshing with a clear vision of what his next steps are to be. And finally, life with Jesus is always multiplying. While Jesus could just stay in one spot and kind of be a hero to the whole town and kind of clean it all up and get all the work done, instead, Jesus is always moving on to include more people into the important work that needs to be done. It is this broad vision of being not complacent, but forging on that we are the benefit for today. Can you imagine if on that day, he went out, he prayed, and then all they ever did was stay in the town of Capernaum? The message would have never gotten out across all the world, across decades and centuries. We will learn some of the same lessons for our faith lives in this series. First, our faith life is public. Next, our faith life is intimate. Then our faith life is private. And finally, our faith life is to multiply. So we begin with our faith life is public. We are called to live out our faith publicly. Jesus' first act with his new disciples is to head to a synagogue and to teach. And I think for us today, that might be the hardest of the lessons, because most Americans see their faith as a very private matter. Many people believe, but we are really not all that interested about talking about our faith in public. So how do we express our faith in community? How do we live out a public faith? Well, honestly, it needs to be done with great care. Having a public faith doesn't mean that we browbeat people because they don't believe the same things as we do. It doesn't mean that we're required to convince someone to follow Jesus. It isn't trying to save anyone. It isn't putting Christian messages on social media or endorsing a different political candidate. It's none of that. A public faith is when we allow the teachings of Jesus to be evident in our life, to do as Jesus taught, to forgive, to love even our enemies, and to give generously. Our faith needs to make a difference in our lives. It needs to change who we are. Author Brennan Manning wrote, "The greatest cause of atheism is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips, then walk out the door and deny him with their lifestyle. That is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable." You see, our beliefs only become faith when we put them into action. Whenever we share our faith publicly, it is really important that we recognize for the 2,000 years since Jesus lived, the sins of the church have made sharing more and more challenging. So we have to understand that in the name of faith, there have been some terrible injustices. So a public faith is caring enough to understand that, to listen to people, and listen even to their criticisms. A public faith also means that we need to be able to share a story of how God has worked in our lives. It isn't a big, long speech. It isn't a sermon. It's a story. It's a story that we name how God is working in your life. Can you all share one short story about how God did something wonderful in your life? That's what people want to hear. And a public faith recognizes that God is at work and that all we need to do is offer evidence of that. Next, our faith is intimate. In Jesus' day, to go into someone's home, to offer hospitality, that was, a really special gift. This was something that people were required to do. They were to open up their hearts and open up their homes. And in the household, that was the place where you really got to know each other in the context of family and friends and friendships. This was also the place where people were cared for. It was a place where you could bear your burdens. And so this is why Peter invited Jesus into his home, because he wanted to connect it more deeply with Jesus. He wanted Jesus to be in a place where he could offer him great hospitality. We too are to bring Jesus into our homes. This might be the most important place where we serve. And you know what? I think this can be super tricky too. Because our family and our close friends, they know all of our failures, right? They know all the ways that we fall short, that we don't live up to being a Christian. In our homes, there is really no hiding who we really are. So what we need to do is to show that we have been transformed by God's love, and it needs to be evident to everyone that lives with us and that we invite into our homes. So an intimate faith does include offering times of prayer or sharing some wisdom from the scriptures, but it also needs to be filled with humility and forgiveness and grace and joy and love and healing. When Jesus entered the home of Peter, he met the immediate need that was there. He immediately healed Simon's mother-in-law. So how are you making spaces in your home to make people in your household feel supported, feel like they matter, feel like they are really important to you? Maybe it's a 5-year-old and playing the games that they want to play. Or maybe it's, a 15-year-old and their video obsession, and you don't really want to do videos. You want them to go outside and play some baseball. Or maybe it's just listening and accepting your young adults' career choices, and they're far different than what your dreams for them were. Supporting the people that you live with, supporting your spouse, letting go of your own self-interest and leaning in to what matters to them. Letting go of our agendas and our preferences for others helps build bonds of trust, and that will support healing in the hard times. And that That more than any kind of preaching in the world, be a witness to who Jesus is. Our faith life also has private moments. The deserted place that Jesus goes in this moment is not a desert. If we look at the geography, there's no deserts near Capernaum. Rather, the place where Jesus goes is a place that is free from distractions. The manner we have of a public faith is when it is grounded in our love for Jesus and for God. We need to go and have a place that we can give ourselves unreservedly, without any distractions, without any competition for our time. It's a place where we can have prayer. It's a place that we gain strength. It's a place where we connect and deepen our relationship with Jesus. And this happens when we have daily prayer and study and worship. So are you setting aside time free from distractions to just be with Jesus? So they sent out a search party when they couldn't find Jesus, and they look for him and they find him. And together they need to make a choice. And what they chose was not to stay in Capernaum, their hometown, but to be on the move and to go to other towns. Jesus and the disciples are on the move. For a life with Jesus was meant for all people, and therefore it needs to multiply. A public faith is a way to help more people find a personal faith in Jesus Christ. But it is also intended to re-energize the church to be more outward-facing community. To do this, we must be focused on praying and listening for ways to present hope and the gospel to those in a way that is pleasing and inviting. Our faith multiplies when we take and we share about the goodness of God with all the world. Jesus went into towns to teach and to heal and to offer people hope. And I feel like, people today, they really need something to hope in and for. And so how could our witness give them that? We offer that when we reach out to our communities. Right now, we're collecting school supplies, and that'll be the way that we can witness to our school community that we really care for them, that they matter. But we'll have other ways to share that love throughout the year, because we need to make sure that our faith, just like that of Jesus and these disciples, is on the move. Faith is a journey. It's learning and changing and growing, and it is ever moving. And so I am going to invite you, Chris and Judy are going to sing a beautiful song this morning, and then we're just going to pause for a moment after the song. And I want you to take a few minutes and consider, how are you going to live out your faith in this next week? Publicly, intimately, privately, so that it will multiply.
I keep finding voices in my
And we're going to read our sending responsively. I have you. You have me. We have each other. We'll reach out to others. And God has us all. Amen. Have a wonderful week. Thank you all for being here. God bless.